Okay, welcome everyone. So this is the first part of retouching any photo, any portrait that you're going to be doing. You want to process in Adobe Lightroom Classic. So I am in Lightroom. I have my one image that's selected in the library module. So I want to make sure I'm going to go to my develop module. So I'm going to click on that. In my develop module, this looks like I already had processed, which I did. So I'm going to go to my reset and actually make a virtual copy just so I can have. Okay, so you don't have to do that. I just did that so I have a copy of what I did. So I'm going to reset this image. So again, we're in Adobe Lightroom Classic. I have my image that's selected. I'm going in to my develop module and I'm going to start with my basic panel. So in the basic panel, this is where we can correct our exposure, adjust our white balance, and also address color, saturation, and vibrance. So I'm going to click to zoom in. I'm going to, on the left side where I had that little triangle, I'm going to click on that so that way it expands so the column stays open. So that way I can get to in the navigator window where I can change my percentage of my preview. So I can get to go larger, make sure I can zoom in even more when I get to my detail panel. So again, starting in basic panel, I'm going to start with the first slider, which is my exposure slider. I'm just going to click holding down the mouse button, and I'm just going to move this slider back and forth, kind of going left to right, just to see how the changes are affecting the image overall. Also paying attention to up on top in my histogram, seeing how the data in that graph is moving around as I move my slider left to right, dark to bright, dark to bright. I do want to brighten up my exposure, even though it already looks like it's probably exposed, a little bit more than balanced. I kind of slightly overexposed, so I want to keep that style of the lighting from my exposure when I captured the image. Still want to keep it slightly overexposed, but I don't have any clipping. I do have the warnings turned on. These two boxes on the top left in the histogram and the top right, those are my warning clippings. So if I have it turned on for the shadows and for the highlights, if I go too far, I'm going to see either red or blue turn on, showing that I'm clipping the data. I'm losing detail in my highlights or shadows. Again, I increased exposure just a little bit. I'm going to click to zoom out. I definitely know, because of the type of lighting that I used on my subject here, this was daylight, but using a kind of like a 6-foot by 8-foot scrim with sunlight. That's what this highlight is. It's a huge kind of large white kind of translucent material that you would find on front of a softbox octabox. So I have a large scrim that I can put on a frame. I use that to pretty much have the sunlight pass through it, pretty much creating like a large diffuser. And since it's so much larger than my subject, it's spreading all that light, creating this nice even lighting, which is pretty much frontal lighting that I have going on here. So back to the adjustments. I want to pull the highlight and my white sliders down to try to control where I'm moving this cursor of the hand right now. The highlights that are showing up on the skin that are starting to get a little bit hot, I want to pull the highlight and the white slider down. I'm going to start with the white slider. So I'm going to grab that, pull that down, going to keep on going. I'm starting to see that shift happen. So it doesn't look as bright. Again, if I bring that up, just to see where I started from, and then come back down. So that's looking pretty good. Maybe 27, negative 27. So I still have some of that highlight there, but it's just not as strong. So that way I'm kind of like trying to bring back the detail in those areas, but still trying to maintain that highlight. So I think that looks, then obviously it's affecting the overall image, but if I click on the eye to turn this on and off to see before and after. So this is before, after, before, after. Let me zoom in. I'm going to go back to 100%. Okay, and again, I'm going to click on the eye to turn this on and off. So this is off, which is my before, on, after. So it looks pretty good. So by pulling down these sliders on the highlight and white, it is decreasing how hot those highlights are showing up on the skin. I increased the exposure a little bit, so that way it's still kind of overall, increasing exposure to kind of balance the changes that I'm doing to those highlight areas on the skin. Obviously, based on your subject with your lighting condition, you want to pretty much make your adjustments based on your subject in the lighting condition that looks good to your eye. So, the way you adjust your image is going to be different than what I'm doing for my image. I just want you to see like how I'm doing this and the thought process of what I'm doing. Okay, so now that I have that, it did increase the contrast a little bit. So what I want to do is probably increase the contrast just a little bit more. I'm just going to put it up to 8 points. I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to turn this on and off to see before and after. Before, after, before, after. So, it's actually, there is some contrast, but it's also kind of, brightened up with, again, my exposure slider being put up to 0.25. So now I'm going to go to my black and shadow sliders. Black slider I'm going to pull down slightly. Shadow slider as well. I want to pull this down. I don't want to go up because that's the wrong direction. I want to have that contrast between the background and my subject based on their complexion, the color of their hair, and the wardrobe that they're wearing. I want to make sure I have some good contrast between the background and my subject, because it's really focused. This shot with the lighting for the subject is really focused on my subject, not necessarily the background. So to help create that isolation, I am again pulling down the black and shadow slider. Again, this is for my image that I'm working on. Yours might be different. So again, you're adjusting these sliders to make your image look the best for your subject in the lighting condition that you photographed. I'm going to do before and after. So this before, after, before, after. Okay, so I'm going to increase the vibrance to counterbalance that adjustment I did on vibrance. I'm going to pull down the saturation. So before, after, zoom back out and do it again, before, after. It's kind of taking out some of the red orange on the skin, where it's starting to get a little bit too reddish orange, by decreasing saturation. But then I'm pushing up the vibrance, which is a more subtle and smarter approach to increasing the saturation for skin tones. So it's a smarter way of increasing the saturation of the colors based on the portrait of a person. So it's not as aggressive. It's a little more subtle. Okay, so I think I'm good with all of my exposure adjustments for the image. So now I'm going to go to my um, detail panel. So in the detail panel, I'm going to zoom in, so I have a little bit larger image showing. I'm going to increase my sharpening. So for portraits, increasing your sharpening around 60 to 80 points is probably like a good spot. I'm going to hold the Alt key, click on the slider, and then pull to the right. As I increase it, you can see hopefully on your screen the changing that's occurring to my image in this black and white view with the grayscale. As the sharpening increases, I start seeing like all the fine details of the face starting to like get a little more intense, which is, you know, happening over every part of the image, which is fine right now. The next slider, I'm going to hold down the Alt key, click on the slider for radius, and I'm going to pull down the radius. So already I'm thinking about trying to counterbalance my adjustment. Increasing the amount of the sharpening, so now by pulling down the radius, I'm countering that adjustment I just made with the amount. About 0.7 looks pretty good. Again, I'm just checking out how it's looking overall, like these lines on the face, these, the age lines, smile lines on the face. I'm seeing how that detail and texture is showing up. Hold down the Alt key, click on the slider for detail. Same thing, now the detail slider, kind of like similar to our, when we do the applying image on separating our detail and color in Photoshop. I want to increase this so that way the detail that I'm seeing in this, kind of like this ghost image of detail, I want to pull the slider up so that way I see kind of like that detail kind of pop. It's going to be at a certain point, so I'm moving my slider, left to right, but kind of moving towards the right of the scale. So I'm moving this back and forth just to see where is it where I can noticeably on my screen see the details start to pop out. When I see that, I kind of slow down the movement until I kind of like dial it right in to a point where it looks pretty good. So for me, that looks like somewhere between 45 to 48, and I'll keep it there. So the last thing of the sharpening, I'm going to hold the Alt key, click on the slider for the masking, and then I'm going to pull this to the right. As I pull to the right, you can start seeing more black show up into the mask of this image, and as I have more black showing, then that's hiding the sharpening from those regions or those parts of the face, which is what I want. I want to isolate the sharpening to the edges of the strong transitions, which is like pretty much around the features of the face. So I'm like about 86, that looks pretty good. I'm gonna release the mouse. So now when I click on the eye or the little toggle switch to turn this on and off to see before and after. So I click to see before, then release to see after. So I can still see detail and texture on the skin, but it's not so like crispy or crunchy would be the term. I'm trying to keep that sharpened, trying to keep that texture, but not to have it overly like texturized. So I still want it to be a bit soft. Alright, so now I'm gonna go down. So the luminance slider, this is where we're gonna remove any kind of digital noise from the luminance, which is the grayscale. So I'm gonna hold the Alt key, click on the slider, and then I'm gonna move this kind of going up the scale to the right, but move back and forth. And again, I'm looking to see like at some point the portrait is going, or the skin of the portrait is going to look like it gets soft and smooth. When it looks like it gets to that soft and smooth kind of buttery look, I'm going to stop and that would be the setting. And again, it's just really looking at a certain part of your image to see like how the image kind of like starts to transform as you move the slider back and forth, as you move up the scale. I think it's somewhere around 26, 27. We'll keep it there. Going to hold the Alt key, click down on the slider, and then same thing. I'm going to pull this down, which is countering the adjustment on the luminance slider, and then just kind of start moving this up. So detail is obviously going to bring back the detail into the image that was kind of reduced by increasing the luminance, which is taking out the noise, but it, by doing that, it actually does a little bit of softening. So we're bringing back some detail back to the overall image. So moving back and forth, it looks like somewhere around 76 looks good. That's part of the luminance, removing noise from the luminance. I'm going to hold the Alt key, click on the contrast slider, and same thing, moving this up the scale, but by rocking this slider back and forth. Looking to see like how the image brings back some of that texture and detail of the skin. So I can still see like these fine lines around the eyes, smile lines around the mouth. So it's got those details, but the surface around those lines is looking softer, but I still have some texture on that skin. So now the sliders for color, to remove noise from the color, I'm going to more towards a shadow area. And so the idea here is I'm paying attention to like these edges. You can kind of see on my image like where the hairs, obviously it's a softer focus because I had a wider aperture, so more shallow depth of field, making just these areas of the hair starting to become more soft focus. I'm looking at the edges between the dark to the dark background to the bright hair. I want to make sure that I don't make those textures between these two values very strong. I want to try to control it from getting too texturized in those spots. As I increase the slider for the color, that's what I'm looking at. I want to see like how much more texture is introduced into those areas. I don't want to go too far. Just want to make it subtle. And then on the detail slider, it's going to help counter that. So if I pull it down, it lessens. If I pull it up, it increases. And again, it's very subtle. So you have to kind of like look at certain areas and kind of keep your eye fixed there, so that way you see that change occur as you move that slider up the scale, but by rocking it back and forth. I think actually mine looks better kind of moving down a little bit. And then last one, smoothing, same thing, gonna pull this all the way down, see how it kind of like softens, again, this transition between the dark background and the bright hair. I'm seeing how this kind of like slightly soft focused area, that texture that's kind of like right at the edge, how's this texture being affected by this slider as I move it, going up the scale, but by rocking left to right, kind of like back and forth, to see what looks good as I go up the scale, moving it back and forth. Again, the objective is not to make that texture too strong. I want it to obviously it's going to be there because it already is there, but I don't want to exaggerate it. I think keeping it low is probably going to look good. All right. Oh, my Lightroom is going a little crazy right there. Okay, so I zoom in, and then I'm going to click on the eye or that toggle switch to turn on and off. So this is my before, after, before, after. So we can definitely see if, you know, the image is zoomed in close enough. I'm at 200%. I can see how all of that fine detail is still kind of there. It actually is still there, but all of that extra, like, almost kind of like the sandy kind of grain that's around, especially on this part of the face where you see like the larger surface areas, and even like, you know, between the lines and right around just the eye, the eyelids, the lashes, coming out more towards the nose on the bottom right. That's all the digital noise that I'm trying to clean up. So by using this detail panel, I'm reducing that, so that way I don't carry that into my image that's going to be exported and opened into Photoshop. By reducing that, I'm now kind of like giving myself a guarantee that I'm going to be working with, you know, some nice, clean, smooth skin area that I can use when I do my retouching, and it's going to make the image look, you know, overall look really good by reducing the noise. Done with that detail panel. Now I'm going to go to my lens correction, open up this one. Easiest one to do, just check to turn on and remove chromatic aberration, check to turn on enable profile corrections, and you're done with that. So now I can export. So I'm just going to come back up to the top. Again, just going to, on the keyboard, I'm going to press that backslash button right above the return key to see before and after. So hold that down to before and release it for after. Before, after. So it's very subtle, but it makes a huge difference. All right, now that I'm done, go to Library module. I'm going to click on Export. In the Export dialog box, I want to make sure it's going to a specific folder. I'm going to click on Choose. And on this, I want to make sure I am going to my downloads. And then I've done this previously, but I clicked to create a new folder, and that new folder, I named it Portrait Retouch, and I'm just going to give this one a number because I already have that folder existing. I'm going to create, click on Choose, and I want to make sure this checkbox is selected to put in a subfolder, and that subfolder I'm going to name the light pattern. So this is, for me, my image, it is frontal flat light. All right. On the file naming in here, instead of just taking the name of the file from the capture, I'm going to check on rename to, and then I'm going to select custom name sequence. In here, I want to name this, like, this is going to be my name, so first name underscore Ramirez underscore light pattern. So this would be my frontal flat light. And then my sequence that I'm starting, my start number is going to be 1. So it's going to be my first name, last name, frontal flat light. So your name with the name of the light pattern and then sequence number. Scroll down, gonna make sure that it's gonna export as a TIFF. Compression is none. Color space is Adobe RGB. Bit depth is going to be 8. Right below that, I'm going to make sure that only on here for the image sizing, we just need to make sure that our resolution is set to 300. And then I'm going to tell this once it's done to, that's fine if it says do nothing, that's fine. So I'm just going to go ahead and export. And now I have the export progress bar on top left. I'm going to wait for that to complete, and once that's done, then my TIFF file is in the folder ready to be opened for Photoshop. I will see you over in Photoshop in the next video. Thanks.